if you plead guilty and this case disappears because we don't want this case, if this place can disappear in a couple of days because you pleaded guilty, the judges will look favourably upon that.
Yeah.
And he could be out in 10 years. He could be out in his late 20s. We all expected a 3-month trial. Him pleading not guilty, excuses being made that he's mentally ill, that he suffered from racism, and he's really a woman trapped in a man's body. We expected excuse after excuse after excuse. And first day in court, he pleads guilty. So that's the end of the court case.
Guilty to everything.
Guilty to everything. So there's nothing to prove now.
Yeah.
We're waiting for a day or two for the sentencing. Why has he done that? And
just for clarity, for our viewers, what exactly has he pleaded guilty to?
My understanding is he pleaded guilty to all the charges, which is 3 murders, half a dozen attempted murders, producing ricin under terrorism charges, having a prescribed ISIS manual. He pleaded guilty to everything.
Yeah, I mean, he's basically, as I understand it, pleaded guilty to the murders and the assault and the injuries.
Yeah.
But also he's pleaded guilty to being a terrorist.
Yeah.
And I want to come back to that later.
Yeah. No, he pleaded guilty to everything. Why has he done that? The conspiracy part of me says there's a reason. He's not pleaded guilty because he thinks he's guilty and he wants it over and done with. He's been not offered a deal, but I think his team have said to him, the best deal we're going to get for you is if you plead guilty now. Because you're under 21, it's highly unlikely you're going to be given a life sentence because you're under 21. You're only 17, 18. If you plead guilty, they'll take that into consideration. You're going to get so-called life, and you could be out in 8 to 10 years. So I think that's why he's pleaded guilty. So what's he now, 18, 19, something like that?
He's 18 now. He was 17 at the time.
Yeah, so he's 18 now.
Yeah.
He could be out in 10 years. He could be out in his late 20s. The court can give him an indefinite life sentence, but it hardly happens to anybody under 21. And the fact he was technically a child when he committed the horrendous crime at 17, all these things are going into his favour. The fact it's not been dragged out in court, the fact that there's been no questions about Starmer's involvement and the jihad part of the attack, and it's all just closed the book on it, may also entice the government to put pressure on the judges to go, we just want this over and done with. So there's a very good chance he could get 10 years. He could be out in 10 years. He'll get something that sounds awful. He might get, indefinite down to probation. But there's a very good chance, regardless of what he gets, he could be out in 10 years. I want death penalty. That's what I would like, death penalty. There's nothing he could be given that I would think is fair.
Do you think it is possible it suits the government that he's pleaded guilty?
Absolutely. And I think that's why he's going to get a lesser sentence. He's not going to get forever now in jail. He's going to be out in 10 years. I think that's part of the deal his team's done. So
are you suggesting then there is a possibility the government may have exerted pressure in some shape, way or form, may not avert pressure, to persuade his lawyers, whoever's defending him, that they would look favourably on a guilty plea? I think unofficial, with no records, it's been made known that if you plead guilty and this case disappears because we don't want this case, if this place can disappear in a couple of days because you pleaded guilty, the judges will look favourably upon that. I don't think they're silly enough to have broken a law on this, to approach people and made offers. They're not that silly, because they know not only would it come out, they'd be in jail and lynched. But I think they've made it. I think they've made it known through back channels and innuendo and
and
yeah,
we look favourably on this.
Yeah, so it might just be a conversation which just say, well, of course, if he pleads guilty,
yeah.
It's likely he'll get out.
It's in the public's interest, to get this case over and done with. It's in the public interest.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the judiciary would look favourably upon that.
Yeah.
That's how these things are done.
Is that what people say? I'm not on Twitter, so is that what people are saying on Twitter about it?
I'm not hearing that, but that was my conclusion within an hour of all this coming out.
Right.
It was like, this doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
I don't understand why he's pleading not guilty. You're not going to lose out by pleading innocent.
Yeah.
And stretching it out and seeing what could happen. And it's like, no, someone's getting something out of this.
And I think the intention, again, of the government or whoever is behind the date of this trial was that this would be masked by Trump's inauguration. Do you think that's happened? Do you think they've been successful in that?
I don't think they thought Trump's inauguration was going to kill this story. I just think they knew, if we're going to have bad news, let's put it out on a busy day.
Yeah.
Let's get it out on a busy day. Same with the Rick Jones, the counsellor.
Yeah.
He was in court that day, and they've postponed his case for 7 months.
Yeah, till August.
Till August.
Yeah.
I just think it's like, get it all on the same day, and there's only so much bandwidth you can report, and there's only so many things people will listen to. Get it all out on the same day.
So some things did emerge during the trial, that even though he pleaded guilty, about Rudy Cabana. I don't know if you want to let our viewers know, in terms of his history, are you aware of what was told?
All I know is he was referred to Prevent 3 times.
Correct.
He had a knife in school at one point. There's a video of him online attacking another student in the classroom that got videoed. Hugely disturbed individual. And
there was also a story, which again I'm interested in your take on this, because I want to know what your view about the father in this is. He set off one day after he'd been expelled from this school. He set off one day with a knife to the school to basically hurt people. Or he had something with names. Yeah. He set off to the school to hurt people in the school, and his father managed to stop him. He came out and stopped him, I think. So this happened obviously quite a long time before the Southport attack. So what are the ramifications of that for the father, and I guess for the authorities, in the fact they knew about this guy? They knew he was dangerous.
Yes. Dangerous people will always slip through the net. The only way to stop that is to arrest and lock everybody up the second anyone complains about him, and we don't live in that sort of society. Prevent has shown it's incompetent, and part of the reason why Prevent is incompetent on things like this, because we've spent years now encouraging lots of other people to refer sexist white boys into Prevent. Prevent's only got so much money and so many officers, and we've been bombarding them with a waste of time referrals to get their figures up that it's not all about Islamic extremism. And we've diluted the work they can do. So that's part of the problem there. Nutcases are in every community, in every country, and we'll never be able to stop all nutcases. We should be able to reduce the number. The parents, I'm against visiting the sins of the father on the son. So just because your parents may have done things in the past, it's not your fault. You were their child, you weren't involved in it. But I take a different approach about visiting the sins of the son upon the father, because that father raised that child. So parents need to take responsibility for their children, even their adult children. They need to take responsibility. Just like when we talked about those 2 white English prostitutes, Lily Phillips and Bonnie Blue, having sex competitions, who can sleep with the most men.
I'm not aware of the sex competition. I'm aware of that Lily, whatever. I knew she slept with 1,000 men.
Yeah, well, she's got a competitor and she's trying to sleep with more now, and there's competition trying to outdo each other all the time. They're in it together. It's all about PR for them. But the point I'm trying to make is, I hold their parents responsible for the actions of their grown daughter. And I do with Rudy Cabana's father.
Rudy Cabana.
We need to... Yeah.
Cabana. Sorry, go on. You call him Ruba Cabana.
We need to have it. I think it's appropriate to have a discussion how much responsibility we place on his parents.
Well, I think the thing I'm more interested in is the fact the father knew he was going to try and hurt people.
That was 3 years before.
Yeah, well, 3 years. It doesn't really matter 3 years before. The father knew he had a history of this, knew he'd carried a knife, knew he'd been expelled, all that sort of stuff. The kid then just manages to stop the child, the boy, the man, going to wreak havoc. Did he not have a responsibility? Would a father, and it's an interesting question, isn't it? Because I'm sure our gentle viewers will have very different views on this. Should a father then take action by going to the authorities in that situation and say, my son is troubled, he's going to hurt somebody, I've managed to stop him today, but somebody needs to take some action now because I can't keep stopping him, and one day I'm not going to be there and he might go and do something crazy. And did the father know about the children, about the fact he was going to the Taylor Swift thing to kill those children?
See, we don't know any of this at the moment.
No.
But hopefully we'll find out over the next weeks and probably months. We don't know. How do we know that he was going to kill those kids at school with a knife and his father stopped him? Was it because his father reported him that?
No. No, this has been revealed presumably by investigators who've been looking into this. The father must have said, 3 years ago he was going to go to school. Right. So I think that's how they found out. I don't think that's unless his father did report him to the event. My understanding is his father didn't report him.
Yeah.
And I can understand the impulse of a father to stop their son doing that. And I also understand the impulse of a father not to report your own child to the police.
But this is an ordinary father. This is a Rwandan father who's come from a country where he was involved in a genocide. I'm not saying he took part in the genocide, but he was involved at some point in the genocide. You know, the killing with knives of 1 million people. So his understanding of what's right and wrong in this country and what he's willing to accept, and knowing he knew people who hacked people to death, is he going to give his son to the authorities in a foreign country? Then we don't know. But I'd like a national conversation about his parents, to an extent where we say, do we deport them or not now? Do we deport them for the sins of the son? Because that'll send a real good message to lots of immigrants in this country, that you, as a young immigrant, can lead to your parents being deported who are also immigrants. I'm not sure where I stand on that yet. I need to give it a lot more thought.
I mean, I think you've hit on another interesting point, which is something you've always said. They're behaving in a way that is appropriate for their culture. So stopping your son going out to stab somebody, that might happen more often in Rwanda than we think it might happen, because of the nature of their society and their culture. Yeah. So it doesn't fit into British society, does it?
So he stopped his black son, who got kicked out of school, from carrying a knife. I know lots of black kids like that, kicked out of school and carry knives.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean they go on to kill 3 little girls, but this is cultural.
Yeah, this is not British culture.
No.
And it circles round again, doesn't it? The idea that he was a British boy, which is bollocks as well. I mean, I'd like to also talk, before we move on to the reaction from the government, about his picture. So we now see...
I mean, what a picture. Yeah. Jesus Christ, even I was surprised at that.
That is a scary picture of this kid, this man. And my immediate thought was those poor bloody kids in that room when that monstrous looking man came in. I mean, he looks evil. He looks like an evil man. The picture actually reminded me of something because of the size of his hair and the way that his eyes are so white. Do you remember the gollywog in Robertson's Jam?
Yep.
That had a similar kind of scary look about it. The kind of the face and the big hair, that big crazy hairdo he's got. Now, that picture I think is horrific. If that picture had been released at the time of the murders, the reaction, people's reaction and demand for answers would have been far more virulent, I see. But apparently that picture was available virtually immediately after the event. Did you know that?
No.
Yes. Yeah. So that picture was taken on the day of his arrest.
Yeah.
but it's never been released. Instead, we were given pictures of...
What do you mean it's never been... Who didn't release it?
I don't know. The police, I'm guessing.
Oh, right. Yeah. I thought you meant it'd been released, but nobody wanted to publish it.
It may have been... I don't know. Maybe we can look into this.
If it had been released, it'd have found its way on the internet.
Right, okay.
So it's not been released. The police...
But it was taken on the day of his arrest. That was the point I was making.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was his arrest photo. That wasn't released because he looks crazy.
Yeah.
I don't remember another time in my lifetime where a mugshot was not released to the public.
Yeah.
When the press asked for it.
Yeah.
So we relied on these sketches where he covered his face.
Yeah.
And we relied on a 7-year-old photo of him supporting Doctor Who with a smiley face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you saw that guy walking down the street towards you, you'd be a bit worried, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Because he has the look of an insane man about him, basically.
He's insane.
So then who made the decision not to release that photo?
That would have been top of the police and the government.
So,
and I would imagine the reasoning would have been, we can't release that photo. First of all, it'll prejudice the case because he looks mental. And we're dealing with far-right riots at the moment. And if they see that photo, that's going to inflame the situation more and there's going to be more riots. So for public safety, we're not releasing that photo.
But who are they to decide that?
They've got a legal right to do it. But it's wrong, but they've probably got a legal right to do it.
And it makes the whole thing even more horrific, the fact that all this time we've been seeing these pictures of this cherubic little black kid, basically, when that actually we should have been seeing the face of the monster.
He looks like a monster.
Yeah. So as a result of this, again on the day of the inauguration, Yvette Cooper announced there would be a national inquiry into the Southport killings. So again, maybe I'm not sophisticated enough in the political arts, Nick. You know far more than I do. Why has that happened?
That's happened because they've already been burnt by not having a national inquiry into the grooming gangs. So they've already been burnt on that. And they've realised they're going to want an inquiry. We either go through months of being beaten and ruin our reputation more, or we announce it ourselves. If we announce it ourselves, then we can write the terms of reference for the inquiry. And that's why I'd say 99.9% of any government inquiry is not worth the paper it's written on, because the politicians writes the term of reference, which means you need to look into this, not this, don't speak to them, only look at these years, don't go off at a tangent. So they make you investigate exactly what they want you to investigate, knowing there's nothing at the end of it. They never give you a broad brief. They never say to these people running the inquiries, look into whatever you want. Wherever the evidence takes you, look there, because you don't know what that's going to turn up. So therefore, we don't want you looking there. We're going to tell you a very tight time frame and a tight area of where to look. So they're going to write that into the brief. And it won't include political interference. It won't include, did Keir Starmer in his previous job as a barrister ever represent anybody who's known to the Ruba Cabana family. All these things will be written into the terms of reference, or written out of the terms of reference. They won't actually state don't do that, but it won't be in it. And we'll get the report in a couple of years' time, and it will say lessons have been learned. This couldn't happen again. We've reformed the referral process now for Prevent, and we're going to spend 100 million on integrating immigrants and second generation immigrants into this country, and it's going to be a whitewash, waste of time and waste of hundreds of millions.
Starmer has already said that he knew what was happening. He was being briefed all the way through this.
Of course, everybody knew that.
So he knew that the guy was a terrorist. He knew the guy was... He will have seen the picture of that, what he looked like. He will have known that this guy was an Islamic terrorist, jihadist, or whatever it might have been. He will have known that Prevent had been told about this guy 3 times. He would have known that the kid had gone to school with a knife. He'd have known he was expelled. He would have known that he was a very troubled individual.
He'd have known everything. Within hours of it happening, he'd have known everything.
And he's admitted this.
Yeah.
So the next question for me, before we get on to it, because Stan made a speech this morning, which again I'm going to come on to. The question I've written down here is, the statement I've written down here, and I want your opinion on this, is free the political prisoners now, exclamation mark. So my view, maybe I'm being naive here, Nick, but all these political prisoners, and we have the list of their names that you and I occasionally go through, who suggested this guy was a terrorist, that it was Islamic attack or whatever, who were imprisoned with the full knowledge of Starmer that these things were true. Shouldn't they be freed now? And just as a backdrop to this, another executive order that Trump has signed today. I'm having to bring you up to speed with what Trump's been doing, because clearly you've not even bothered reading the papers today. But Trump has also signed an executive order today freeing 1,500 January the 6th political prisoners immediately. Yeah. So those guys, the guys who stormed the Capitol, who didn't hurt anybody, or did, what are they?
I wouldn't use the word storm.
Walked in very slowly. Yeah.
That's what they did.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they did. They walked in very slowly. Actually encouraged by FBI agents, we now find out. So the guys that entered the Capitol building nicely and calmly on January 6th, 1,500 of them are being freed now. Yeah. Trump's gone in and signed a bit of paper. Yeah. Yeah. So that's another thing I would add to the list of things that need to be happening now. So given Starmer knew, the government knew, Yvette Cooper will have known that this guy was exactly what these people were saying he was. They should be freed now.
I agree. Won't happen. Won't happen. Starmer can't afford to do it, because it sends the signal, first of all, that he was wrong, that he was biased. But don't forget, he used those political prisoners to hopefully ensure no one else goes on the streets. You can't release them all and then not expect everyone to go back on the streets once the next attack happens. So this was all about controlling. This was never about justice. These people never got to court because of justice. They got to court because it was politically convenient to punish some people to make sure no one else went on the streets. So they will remain in jail.
And is that a national scandal?
It is, and hopefully it'll maybe be addressed by the next government who comes in. And maybe one day, maybe a government in the future will have to issue apologies to those people on behalf of the nation.
It's got to happen, hasn't it? But if you're saying that's not going to happen until the next government gets in, that's 4 more years for those guys.
Yeah, potentially, yeah.
What I don't understand is, why are people not writing about this stuff? Why are we not on the streets about this stuff, Nick?
Because 1% of the people on the streets were idiots and ruined it for everybody else. The majority of people in this country still rely to a certain extent on mainstream media. It was successfully portrayed as far right to a certain extent because we could see the violence. We could see the bricks being thrown at police. We could see people trying to set fire to hotels. None of that is acceptable. But they were only 1% of the people demonstrating, and they ruined it for everybody else. I just hope the next time British people are on the streets after the next atrocity, which is coming, because there's always an atrocity coming, I hope next time those individuals and people like that will understand better, and the other people on those demonstrations need to police those people better and give them a good hiding and saying, every time you throw a brick at the police, you're ruining everything. More girls are being raped, more girls are being murdered. You know, you're not helping anybody. And so we need to police those things better, the individuals there, and give someone a good hiding so they know you don't do that. But they're stuck in jail at the moment, and and they're gonna do their term. You know, they may be out halfway through. I mean, that woman was halfway through her term and didn't get early parole.
They've turned down her parole. No, I was going to talk about that later. Yeah. I can't remember her name now.
Yeah, well, that's how I know.
Yeah, so
That's how I know they're not going to release him early, because...
So Julie Sweeney, she's a 53-year-old. She was jailed for 15 months over social media posts. Yeah. And I think those social media posts were very simply things like, oh, burn the mosque, we need to burn the mosque down, and things like that. Relating to Islamic, the fact she regarded it Islamic.
But this is online. There's a big difference to me between online and on the streets.
Oh, yeah, she was online.
There's a difference.
This is a little woman in Cheshire, 53-year-old little woman. Not little woman, it's not that old. And somebody wrote, this is the story of the day. No early release for one of the political prisoners.
Yeah.
This old woman will be taught a lesson she will never forget, and through her we will all remain afraid of the government. Welcome to Soviet UK.
Did I write that?
You might have done.
Yeah, I think I wrote that. And that's how I know they won't release the political prisoners, because if they wanted to get rid of this...
yes, you did write it, yeah.
If they wanted to get rid of this problem of the political prisoners, they would quickly wait till paroles and let them go at parole, the first parole, to free up the places and to stop and have the government stop being accused of having political prisoners. They'd get them out. They've done. We've sent the message now. Just get them out of jail, but they're not. They're refusing paroles. That's how I know.
This is a national fucking scandal, I think, with these political prisoners.
That's why I call it Soviet Britain.
Yeah. This is a national scandal. So Starmer's came on the TV this morning to give one of his many speeches. There's just one thing that gave me a glimmer of hope about this. He didn't say far right at any point, as I understand it. I don't know if you watched it, but I think he didn't say far right.
I didn't watch it, but I've not read that he said far right.
What he did say is we've got a new terrorist threat.
Yes.
And what he said that threat is...
young boys in a bedroom on the internet.
Young men in bedrooms is now... So it's like... rather than saying the threat we've got is Islam, it's here now, there's too much of it. Rather than actually just tell the bloody truth, he says now the threat is young men in bedrooms. So I was thinking all the young white kids who were told they're shit at school and the toxic males and the racists and they have, what's the word? What have they got? White privilege and all that shit, all the critical race theory bollocks. So now, they can't afford to live in another house because the government's ruined the economy and people can't earn enough money the tax too heavily to buy. So they've got to stay at home in the parents' home in their bedroom. And now they're a danger because they're a young man in a bedroom. Yeah.
So he's basically saying, I blame young men masturbating in their bedrooms on the internet. Can't young men do anything now? Can we not sit in our bedrooms and just masturbate? Can we not?
I mean, it is ludicrous, isn't it? It's pathetic.
He needed a new boogeyman.
Yeah.
He's been told by his advisors, for God's sake here, don't say far right, because everyone laughs at us.
Yeah. You think he's finally got that message?
Oh, now? I think he's been told, don't say far right. They're laughing at every time you say it. You annoy people and they'll laugh at you. We need a new type of enemy. Start talking about the wankers in the bedrooms. Blame them, because no one likes a wanker. They're the problem. So I think he's just swapped far right to young men in their bedrooms on their own.
Yeah.
Pathetic.
Yeah. Young men, not young Islamic men, not young Muslims, not young Pakistani, not anything to do with that.
He can't afford to distinguish of who he really means. He has to use these blanket terms.
It's pathetic.
Because he still wants Muslim votes.
It's pathetic, isn't it? Young. So it's basically incels. So basically it's like young white men, as you say, masturbating at home in bedrooms, and now the greatest threat. But as I read that, what I thought, and I think I wrote it on a WhatsApp group I'm in, if you lined up 100 people and said, what's our biggest threat at the moment in this terrorist threat at the moment in this country, do you think any one of them would have said, or would 90% of them have said, yes, the threat is definitely young men in their bedrooms? Nobody would have said that, would they? No. You lined up 100 people, not one of them would say it's young men in their bedrooms is the threat we're facing at the moment. Well, I would suggest if they were normal people like you and I, 80% would say it's Islam. And Islamic men, basically, are the biggest threat to this country.
At the moment. Because 30 years ago, it was Irishmen.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
So, we have to deal with the information. we've got and the time period we're living in. At this moment in time, the number one danger, 80-90% of the danger, is Islamic terrorism and Islamic nutcases. It's not always been like that, and it won't always be like that, but at this moment it's that.
At the moment, the biggest terrorist threat to this country is Islamic men, jihadists, potentially who are going to do that. The biggest threat to young English girls at the moment is Pakistani men in grooming gangs. You know, that's the reality, isn't it? But for some reason we can't say these things. Oh, well, we can say them now. Well, you and I are saying them.
Well, we're saying, but we're not looking for votes, are we? We're not looking for a block of votes of the Muslim community who are harvested by the inmans and the political go-betweens at the mosques who tell everybody, bring all your postal votes here and we'll fill them all in together and just leave them here and we'll deliver them. So you've got to make sure the local imam, the local mosque is on board if you want to harvest those Muslim votes. You don't harvest those votes if it looks like you're criticising Islam or that community. And that's exactly why he's blaming young men at home on the internet. Within that, he means young men being radicalised online into Islam. He means that in there as well, but he puts a fog over it all. So he's blaming all young men, correct. All at home, all on the internet, because he doesn't want to pick anyone out. And it is pathetic. It is genuinely pathetic, isn't it? He just will not address the issue that we're facing as a country. Because he can't, because his political career and his party's existence relies on it. But I think the sad thing about that, Nick, is if somebody actually came out now and started speaking the truth about the issues, they would get far more votes than the Pakistani bloc or the Islam bloc could get, and they would romp home in an election. This is where the mood of the country is now. It is, but that is just projection, and that is an educated guess. They don't want educated guesses. They're thinking, this is our winning formula. We've been winning like this for decades. We just need to show up our vote. So I think you call it the playbook, don't you? What they don't understand is that playbook has been torn up and thrown out of the window. And we're seeing what it's like now in Europe. We're seeing what it's like now in America. And this bullshit doesn't work anymore with us. We're not stupid. You know, you and I have been awake for a while, but I think everybody else is starting to wake up now. The playbook has also been ripped up by the Muslims themselves, because they've started electing independent radical Muslims in Parliament. There's talk about an Islamic party they tried to set up an Islamic party, but it failed the electoral commission test. But the Muslims themselves are beginning to realise, we don't need the Labour Party. You know, there's enough of us now in these areas for us to get our MPs elected, for us to take over that council. We don't need the Labour Party. We're not playing second fiddle to the Labour Party anymore now. We're the masters here. We're going to run this area the way we want to run it. So Labour are already losing them, hence why they're doubling down, trying to tempt them back.